The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Welcome to Albany County News. I'm Mary Rozak, the Director of Communications for Albany County. In the next 30 minutes, you're going to hear a little bit more about one particular department and the programs and services that it offers in Albany County. And I hope that you'll find it not only interesting, but that you will be able perhaps to use the programs and services or know someone who will be able to. So joining me today is Karen Ziegler, the Director of the Albany County Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mary.
It is quite a mouthful to say the Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center. It is a department, a center that does so much good.
We try very hard.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's got to be very difficult. I know that last year alone, as we just jump right in, there were nearly, I should say, not over 2,000 cases of domestic violence.
Yes.
in Albany County.
Yes.
And so what that number sounds significant. What does that mean to the center and for Albany County in particular?
Domestic violence is certainly an issue, not only in Albany County, but in every county. But so I don't want anyone to think that Albany County is a hotbed of domestic violence, but yes, there is domestic violence in every community. It's in every neighborhood, every family, so that it's not just somebody else's problem, it's our collective problem. I think for a long time, we really didn't acknowledge domestic violence. We said, well, happens behind closed doors stays behind closed doors. It was a family issue. It's a community issue. We look at any number of socioeconomic factors, men and women, anyone can be a victim, and it not only impacts the victim, it impacts their children, and it impacts the family and the larger community. So of all of the victims that we serve, I would say almost half are victims of domestic violence.
Wow. Tell me, how does the center, how do you serve victims?
We have, well, even broadening it out from more than just domestic violence victims, we have 4 key programs. So for domestic violence, for example, if a person has been abused in some way, it could be, again, financial, it could be physical, it could be sexual, it could be emotional, psychological. There's many forms of abuse when it comes to domestic violence. They can go to family court or criminal court, police court, any of the police courts in Albany County. If they do go to the police court, what we'll do is we will get information from the police department and we will do outreach. We will contact the victim by phone call or letter, making them aware of their rights as a victim in Albany County. They have a right to access to our agency so that we can facilitate communication between the victim and the DA's office. The ADAs, Assistant District Attorneys, have so many cases. It's very difficult for them to give, although they do their very best, but to cut that kind of communication. So we will reach out to the victims, we'll find out what happened, we'll find out what they need. We do a very holistic assessment. So we'll talk about medical needs, housing needs, educational needs, any number of things. We will assess them and make referrals and find services for them. We'll find out if they know the perpetrator, domestic violence situations that they would, what would they like to see happen? Maybe they think there's a substance abuse problem, maybe it's a mental illness, maybe there's something going on that they could maybe offer very specific recommendations for the court. We ask them if they need an order of protection and explain the 2 different kinds of orders of protection. There's a full stay away, and then there's a no illegal contact. And the no illegal contact means they can have, they can be around each other, but there can be no illegal behavior.
Well, wouldn't that, I mean, it sounds like that would be a given with no illegal behavior.
Yeah, well, it doesn't seem like most people would definitely want that. But if, for example, if there's children involved, the victim might opt for no illegal versus a full stay away.
So what would the no? Can you give
no
me
illegal?
an example of no illegal? What would
Absolutely.
that-
What if there were two coworkers and they both are going to continue to work for the same employer, but there was some type of altercation between the two? So this wouldn't obviously be domestic violence. This would just be
Right.
some type of
Sure.
maybe simple assault. The victim could request a no illegal, which means they could continue to work in the same agency, but the individual who has been designated as the batterer or the perpetrator can have no illegal contact. Now, if that is violated at that point in time, the victim can return to the court and ask for full stay away.
Well, what kind of contact would you think would qualify then? If they're working in the same office,
Right.
let's say, you're going to end up having to by default probably talk to that person or share a file with that person or some.
It's possible,
engagement.
and depending on the size of the office, perhaps one person can move from one department to another or change their office settings. But there are occasions when employers will not will retain both employees, and the person who's been the victim would like some type of acknowledgement by the court and the community that something happened that shouldn't have happened. So they might pursue a no illegal at that time, having that, and then they could go back to their employer and say, I have this no illegal contact. I need some accommodations, and perhaps, hopefully, the employer will give them that accommodation. As you said before, if a person was able to refrain from illegal behavior, it wouldn't have happened in the first place. So I'm not sure exactly how successful or useful a no illegal contact is. Even a full stay away, we'll acknowledge it's just a piece of paper. Sure. And if somebody wants to violate that order of protection, they will, and they do.
We all watch TV. We all go to the movies.
Yes.
We see in those settings violations all the time. How common is it for someone to violate an order of protection in your experience with through the center?
I'd say actually it's a smaller number percentage-wise. Most people will acknowledge the order of protection and maintain that. The percentage that violates it frequently, and sometimes the violence escalates. So those are actually the most problematic and dangerous of all the domestic violence cases that we see. I know that the governor has a task force on domestic violence, and that's one of the things that the task force has looked at in terms of homicides, fatalities, is there are repeated violations of the orders of protection, which is criminal mischief, or there's other designations that can be given by the police, depending on the exact nature of the violation. But when orders of protection are violated, it raises the risk for the woman and the victim and their family.
And I know that was a small slip, because I know you and I talk a lot, and have talked in the past, that we often think of, when we think of violence, first of all, I started with domestic violence because that is often what people hear about and think about when they think of sexual violence and women. And I said, and women. But my point is, it's not just about women. It is something, violence and domestic violence is something that's perpetrated against men as well.
Absolutely. And I think men can be very uncomfortable coming forward as victims. I think the mythology in our culture is that men are very strong and men are never victims. And I think it can be very hard for men to acknowledge that this is an abusive relationship, whether it's physically abusive or emotionally or financially abusive. Again, there's multiple types of abuse that happen within a domestic violent relationship. And dating violence. We're seeing a great deal of dating violence among teens and college-age people, and that can also be male and female victims as well. So anyone who pressures you, who is using power and control to get you to do a certain behavior or refrain from behavior, the power and control dynamic is the key component to domestic violence.
Well, let's talk about, you segued in a little bit to colleges and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand has been front and center, as well as New York State and the governor's office, making sure that our colleges, college grounds are safer, that there is a safe haven, that there are rules to go by. What kind of role do you play? Because I know that you are often on college campuses, conducting discussions, trainings, etc. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. I can talk about where we are and where we'd like to be. Albany's rich in the number of colleges and universities and higher institutions that we have. So we're very lucky to have this wealth of community opportunities for people. However, there's depending on the statistic, 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 college age, and primarily women, are the victims of attempted or sexual assault. I know that number seems high, and some people have a difficult time acknowledging it, but it actually, I think, is a very real number, and it is a frightening number. One of the things that we talk about in my agency quite a bit is that the issues around communication and healthy relationships, I don't think are taught early enough. We're doing, with the county exec support, a number of anti-bullying campaigns and interactions with schools. I would love to see every school, starting in elementary school, work on anti-bullying work, which is all about healthy relationships, compassion, empathy. It's how to have good communication skills. Mm-hmm. I think if we work with the youngest of our children with anti-bullying work, bullying prevention work, when we got to middle schools, did things like healthy relationships. What is normal? What can be expected? Most children these days have a cell phone, have some type of cell phone. Mm-hmm. It's not normal or healthy to get 100 texts a day from your girlfriend or boyfriend. Mm-hmm. That's actually a sign of jealousy and a sign of control. Mm. But I think that's not necessarily defined. In fact, with our media, our culture, the young person could think, oh, they really care about me, they really love me, look how much attention they're paying to me. And they don't see it as the control issue that it is. When we get into high schools and young people start dating, we can talk about, in terms of communication, language that's used, the issues of consent, and any form of consent, not just in terms of sexual behavior, but just in terms of touching, in terms of sharing things. So, and if we could work more with high schools around dating relationships, again, healthy relationships and communication skills, I think if we wait till we get to college to talk about the issues of consent and relationships, we've waited too long, because people have already started to have ingrained behaviors and they have their patterns.
Sure. That sounds wonderful, but I'm going to play the devil's advocate. There are going to be those, certainly those parents out there, or those guardians, let's say, who have a hard time when it comes to even talking about the birds and the bees.
Sure.
And time talking about abstinence versus, some kind of protections and birth control. If you're talking about high school and you're broaching that issue of sex, how difficult do you think that is, or is to actually get in to be able to talk to the ages that you need to, the students you need to talk to, or even the parents? How difficult is that?
We can talk about consent, not even bringing sex into the conversation. There's a wonderful YouTube piece, and it talks about consent as a cup of tea. Would you like a cup of tea? Yes, I would. No, I would not. Well, if you don't want a cup of tea, I won't make you a cup of tea. If you say you want a cup of tea but change your mind, I won't force you to drink a cup of tea. And it actually takes the metaphor of a cup of tea through various scenarios that certainly could be around sex, but it just talks about, if I agree to something, what does a verbal agreement look like? What does active consent look like? It's not my not saying I don't, but saying, yes, I would love a cup of tea. It's active, it's engaged consent. It's the fact that I can refuse. I can change my mind at any time. Just because I wanted a cup of tea yesterday doesn't mean I want a cup of tea today.
Certainly.
So using that metaphor, certainly it could be brought into the idea of range of sexual behavior, but it's just in terms of, do you want to kiss? Or can I borrow your phone? I mean, so anything and everything really is an issue of consent. So we never have to touch an issue that a parent might be uncomfortable with. But the idea of consent, the basis of consent, go across all kinds of behaviors.
Those are really good examples, and I think things that people can live with. But don't you think, and I'm going to ask your opinion on this, don't you think perhaps as a society, when it comes to sex, when it comes to those discussions and the issue of consent, you must see even victims that struggle with the whole consent. Did I consent? Did I?
Yes.
The mixed messaging thing. That's got to be tough.
I think it is very difficult. A lot of victims do blame themselves. The myth of the stranger rapist is, hopefully it's been really addressed. Over 70% of sexual assaults are perpetrated by those known to the victim, whether it's a dorm mate down the hall, whether it's a classmate, whether it's a colleague, whether it's a neighbor. Most rapists are known to the victim.
70%?
70%. So it's really important when we do talk to anyone, but particularly children, to not focus on stranger danger. It's generally not a person that they've never met lurking in the dark. That's not to say that doesn't happen. Of course it does. But far more often, it's a person who will play upon the trust of the victim. So it could be someone that they've known in their lives, and we socialize children particularly and women to be accommodating, to smile, to allow people into their space. So if someone were to come over or into your dorm room or come over into your home and stand too close, we might get a little uncomfortable, we might try to move away, but if they follow us, many people would not necessarily move away a second time because they're afraid of making the other uncomfortable, and they're not paying attention to their level of discomfort. So perpetrators take advantage of that. They, if there's children and even adults, there's a lot of grooming behavior. So if I touch you, will you allow that? If I touch you here, will you allow that? If I touch, so generally speaking, it's not the first thing that happens, but there can be a period of time when things happen. And it doesn't have to be a long period of time. It doesn't even have to be a day, but it could be even within a half an hour. How close can I get you? What will you allow me to do? That I think most perpetrators know that the victim is uncomfortable, and they continue to push it. Rape isn't sex. Rape is violence with sex as the weapon. So it's all about that I get to impose my will on another person, and I choose sex as the way to do it. Domestic violence is another way that people impose their will on an individual. And domestic violence can certainly include sexual violence. But if I'm at a party and I'm standing too close, and next thing you know, I'm drinking something more stronger than I had thought I was. Alcohol is the first and best date rape drug. I know we talk a lot about drug-facilitated rapes, we talk about roofies and a number of other things. Alcohol alone is sufficient to create a condition where a victim can't consent or is unsure about what exactly is happening. So if I'm at a party, again, at any age, particularly the younger I am, but at any age, I'm at a party and I'm having a certain amount of alcohol where I'm not making good decisions anymore, my judgment may be impaired. That makes me, unfortunately, a very prospective victim to someone who would like to have to engage in sexual conduct with someone, and either they don't care that I'm not consenting, or that could actually add to their experience. So we certainly want to look at the fact that those communication skills are very important. How to say no. It's not that victims don't say no. Rapists don't respond to no. So again, we don't want to blame victims to say, well, what did you do? It's not about what they did or didn't do, war, or what time it was, or what they were doing. It's the fact that an individual decided that they were going to rape someone else. It's only the perpetrator that has the responsibility of rape. But we don't necessarily say that, and we to this day do a lot of victim blaming. Sometimes we'll even say, well, go out in pairs and don't wear short skirts and we give the victim the responsibility of maintaining their safety, where I would like to believe that it's our community, our society that has the responsibility of all of our safety and holding the batterers and the rapists accountable for their behavior.
We're talking today with Karen Ziegler, the director of the Albany County Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center. Do you actually then tell those students on college campus during training? It's like you said, it's easy to say, go in pairs.
Yes.
It would be great to think that the community at large is really truly out there paying attention and doing. What do you tell the students?
Well, I will say we never get enough time. We're very involved with freshman orientations and would love to be even more involved with all of the campuses. But we talk about things like consent. We talk about rape. We talk about what that is. I think a lot of young people are confused sometimes. The old expression was date rape, what we call now non-stranger rape. And if you're, with a partner, we don't socialize. I'm going to be very gender specific. We don't socialize young men well when it comes to accepting no. Particularly when it comes to sexual behavior. So if a couple are starting to engage in any type of activity and the young woman may or may not know how to say no, but there's body language, there's cues, there's different things. So we'll talk about, again, enthusiastic, active consent, which is critical, and also very much a part of the New York State Enough is Enough law. We really want active consent. We also talk about something that I think is critical, and that's called bystander intervention, engaged bystanders. And this, again, would be across the community, because you know, Mary, we have our own Be the Difference program for Albany County employees. And an engaged bystander is someone who may be a roommate, someone at a party, someone in the community, an employee, who is observing a behavior and they start to feel uncomfortable. We really want to encourage people that if they have that gut feeling that, that something is wrong, there's something wrong, and not to override that. So
what do you do?
We teach a variety of things, and the one answer we don't want to accept is nothing. We don't want people to do nothing. But beyond nothing, there's a huge number of things that people can do. We don't want people to put themselves in harm's way. We are not looking for anyone to act as a hero and step between two combatants and possibly get very hurt, and the situation could escalate. But the expression, no one can do everything, but everyone can do something, is what we stand behind. That we'll talk about, is distraction something that could be done? So if you were at a party and something were going on, could you walk up to the victim and pretend and start to engage them in a conversation and get them away from the individual that appears to be plying them with alcohol or something, and say, "Are you okay? You know, who did you come with? Let's find them. How can I get you back to your room?" There was a great story that Dorothy Edwards told of a fraternity party, and a young man, because I know it can be very difficult for young men to be comfortable with this, but he walked in and he said, "Oh, hey man, I think someone's towing your car." The individual left to check out their car, and he got the young woman to a place of safety. I think that in our culture that it can be difficult for men to sometimes hold other men accountable, that we want that behavior can be seen as uncool or unacceptable, and that's the part of the culture I would like to change, that it does become cool, that it's absolutely acceptable and appropriate for men to hold others accountable. That's not okay. That's not okay.
Sure. Let's see if you can give me an example. The workplace is a very different kind of scenario, because there's a whole other dynamic going on there. It's not that you want to ignore, but you also might be thinking, am I really reading this or misreading this? Right. So what do you do in a workplace situation if your gut is saying something's not quite right, but what do you do?
Well, it could certainly depend, and if it's an interaction between an employee and a client, or two employees. One of the things you certainly could do would be to observe and maybe enter the space, depending on how it is. And just sometimes a third party walking into a room can de-escalate it. It can change the energy of the dynamic. It might be taking one of the parties aside after the fact and saying, "Hey, I felt a little tense before. Is everything okay with so and so?" You could go to a supervisor and say, I observed something and I'm not sure what's going on. I'm not sure if it's my place to say something, but I just want to let you know that I saw this. It could be as simple as it can, depending on what it was, maybe dropping off some educational information on someone's desk to say, "Here's a resource. I'm not sure if this is appropriate." So what we do is we teach the whole spectrum, a continuum of behaviors that people can use to intervene in a way that's safe for them, that doesn't escalate whatever is going on between the two individuals, but can change the dynamic so that both parties can step back. We had an example, two of our staff people, amazing, Bernice and Patricia, as you know, had left work, had clocked out, and were waiting at the bus stop for their bus, and they saw two young women, teenagers, that looked like they were going to engage in a physical altercation. Each one, Bernice took one, Patricia took the other. They talked to them. They were just asking them what was going on. Well, the bus came for one of my staff. She crossed the street to get the bus. The young woman crossed the street with her and left. So sometimes it's just that simple. It's just giving people the option of, this doesn't have to go any further. This can stop here.
And that's being the difference.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what Albany County, we want to be the difference. And Albany County as a whole wants to play that role in our community.
Well, that's wonderful, and I know that, as you said, our county employees are engaged in that, and that's very important. I want to switch gears dramatically in the few minutes we have left and talk about January being something that is called Human Trafficking Awareness Month.
Yes.
Everyone thinks human trafficking is somewhere else.
Yes.
Happens somewhere else, just like they might think domestic violence happens somewhere else. Talk to me a little bit about human trafficking in Albany County.
There are about 21 million human trafficking victims worldwide in every country. And New York is the 4th largest reporter of human trafficking in the United States. Last year alone, there were 200 trafficking victims reported in New York State. There have not been that many in Albany County, and I think that's because it's underreported. There are 2 primary categories that we see of human trafficking.
Sure.
There's sex trafficking and there's labor trafficking. Men and women, young and old, both domestic-born and foreign-born, can be victims of trafficking. Human trafficking actually has quite a lot in common with both sexual violence and domestic violence. And there are aspects of grooming and there's psychological and different types of abuse that are involved. It's a modern-day form of slavery. It is taking an individual, depriving them of their human rights through force, fraud, or coercion, and forcing them to engage in a behavior, whether it's domestic servitude or sexual slavery, for the profit or benefit of the trafficker. And again, there are some groups that are more at risk. Youth, certainly, LGBT youth, runaway youth. The statistic is about 1.5 million children run away every year, and about a third of those are engaged in human sex trafficking within 48 hours.
Wow.
That is a terrifying statistic.
Well, if you think about that, I mean, you know, you've got a child who has
Absolutely.
nowhere to stay, wants food,
Yes.
wants clothing,
and no resources.
Right.
Foster homes, group homes, youth shelters are primary hunting grounds for traffickers, because these are children who are maybe unassociated. They maybe don't have a lot of resources. They may not have a lot of friends. They're often children in those circumstances may have previously been the victim of physical or sexual violence, and that makes them more vulnerable to being trafficked. And traffickers are very good at identifying potential victims.
Well, as I said, January is the Awareness Month, and in Albany County, I know that our Department for Children, Youth, and Families
Yes.
has a campaign ongoing. They'll see in bus shelters and
Yes.
on buses some of the signs and the message to stop human trafficking. A lot of what the Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center does revolves around volunteer support.
Yes, very much so.
It's got to be very difficult on someone when you're taking a call on a hotline. It's got to take its toll. So you're looking for a very special type of person. Are you or are you not?
Oh, very much so. And we have different types of volunteer opportunities. We have our court program. So if there are people who are interested in the criminal justice process, either they're in school as students or as adults, we train them how to be court advocates, which is a wonderful way to support the community. We have office volunteers, and they do any number of projects for us. And we have, our largest number of volunteers are our hotline volunteers. And these are people who are calling at a moment of great need. And it could be that they are a previous victim of sexual assault, but more often not, they were just assaulted. And what we do is we accompany them to the hospital during the forensic rape exam, and we are there for the victim. We provide education and information for the victim. We help them through the process. They have questions, and we support their choices. We don't have any agenda in that at all. We support them with the New York State Office of Victim Services Victim Compensation application to apply for anything that would be available to them depending on their circumstances. But yes, we have a large number of students, social work students, psychology students, but we love more community people who are just interested in being a part of a moment in someone's life when they are incredibly open to having a connection with another person to help them start that healing process.
What kind of time are you talking for? There's a training process. I'm sure it's different for each of the examples you gave. And what kind of time does that take? And what kind of time are you looking for in terms of volunteerism?
We have actually put most of our training online. So we used to have a lot of it because it's about a 35-hour commitment, and we used to do it all in person. Now we have a great deal of it online, and we have a wonderful support from the different colleges locally with the platforms, but they do the didactic work online, and then we have them come in to do 5 2 to 3 hour skill practice sessions. So they're very focused, discussion-based. We can answer questions, and we practice through role plays and conversation the skills that they've been just learning, so that when they are ready to be on the hotline, they're fully prepared. We take them on a tour of the hospital emergency room so that they're comfortable and they're familiar with that. Once they are trained, we ask them to take 1 shift a week, 5 shifts a month, and the shifts are anywhere between 5 and 7 hours.
Okay.
And it's a 24/7 hotline, so we look for coverage from 5 at night to 7 in the morning, and all weekends and holidays.
That's perfect. And people can find out more information by going to albanycounty.com.
Yes, /CVSVC, and just look at the volunteer tab. We have descriptions of all of our volunteer opportunities as well as the applications.
Okay. Well, this has been very informative. I know that there are we've touched on the surface of so many things that you'll have to come back and I know you're wearing your purple
Always.
today, which for those who don't know, purple is
domestic violence awareness.
Domestic violence awareness. Well, thank you, Karen.
Oh, Mary, thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
We have been talking today with Karen Ziegler, who is the director of the Albany County Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center. I'm Mary Rozak. This has been Albany County News. See you again soon.